In our headlines on this Wednesday afternoon, May 1st, here in South Korea. Medical schools have shared their numbers of admission seats for the academic year starting 2025, and their combined new quota stands at around 4,600, lower than the government's goal of 5,058, as public universities plan modest expansions. Meanwhile, President Yoon is reportedly planning a press conference around the time of the second anniversary of his inauguration, which is on May 10th. And on the trade front, Korea's exports maintained their momentum in April, marking an on-year surge for the 7th month in a row to log over $56.2 billion. Medical schools here in Korea are looking to expand their enrollment for next year by some 500 that is, to raise the total admission quota to about 4,600, falling short of the government's goal of slightly above 5,000. Now, this outlook follows their recent disclosure of admission seats for the year 2025. Our Lee Si-hoo has the latest.
Most medical schools affected by the government-led enrollment quota increase have finalized their enrollment figures for 2025 admissions, and it seems there will be 1,550 more students admitted on top of the current enrollment quota of 3,058, which has been frozen since 2006. That's less than the government's original plan to increase the number of student doctors by 2,000. Most national universities outside the capital region decided to admit around 50% fewer students than first planned. Most private universities are either sticking to their original plan or decreasing admissions by just 10 to 20 students. National universities were given much more room to increase numbers than private universities, with the government originally expecting an increase of 800 students nationwide. But it's expected the overall increase will be just half of that number, or around 400, due to strong opposition, especially from student and trainee doctors. The estimate is based on the decisions of all but one of 9 national universities outside the capital which have made their decisions, and the assumption that Jeonnam National University, which will decide its enrollment by mid-May, will follow the overall trend. Once all universities have made their decisions, the Korean Council for University Education will review the numbers. The final numbers will then be reflected in medical school application guidelines to be announced in late May or early June. Meanwhile, the nation's largest doctors group, the Korean Medical Association, which has maintained its firm opposition to the increase, launched its new leadership on Wednesday. The new president, Im is expected to voice even stronger opinions against the government plan. Im has argued for decreasing total enrollment by up to 1,000, citing South Korea's low birth rate as the reason. He plans to form a consultative body consisting of medical students, doctors, and medical professors to prepare for a talk with the government. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Starting today, the alert for COVID-19 stands at the lowest level of attention on the country's 4-level system. The downgrade means mask requirements at hospitals have been lifted. Also, COVID-19 tests are no longer mandatory ahead of accessing nursing homes and other at-risk facilities. Meanwhile, those with COVID-19 are recommended to isolate for 1 day instead of 5 days after major symptoms abate. President Yoon is planning a press conference around the time of the second anniversary of his inauguration, which is on May 10th. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young covers this upcoming agenda, that is, and more.
President Yoon is likely to hold a press conference to mark his second year in office and revive a senior secretary post in charge of civil affairs in the near future, in a move to sharpen his administration's sense of public sentiment. According to sources within Yoon's office, the president may hold a media conference as early as next week, either before or after May 10th, the day of his inauguration in 2022. The president has not held a presser since August that year to mark his 100th day in office. He also stopped his impromptu Q&A sessions with the media after a series of unsavory clashes with one local broadcaster. However, following his ruling People Power Party's heavy defeat at the general election last month, Yoon has vowed to improve his communication with the media and the public. His senior press secretary Yoon said in a TV interview Monday that the public can expect to see a press conference to mark 2 years of the administration. The top office is also moving towards reviving a position Yoon previously scrapped when he took office. A senior secretary for civil affairs may soon be appointed to broadly manage personnel issues within the administration and pick up on political trends and public sentiment. Yoon, during his electoral campaign, had pledged to abolish the position, citing misdeeds that occurred under previous administrations, as the secretary wielded too much power over government bodies and could investigate civilians. When instating the new secretary, Yoon will reportedly focus more on discerning public sentiment. According to Realmeter on Monday, the leader's approval rating fell for the third consecutive week to 30.2%, the lowest since August 2022. The president himself having apologised for failing to reflect the wishes of the people, the Yoon administration is taking steps to become more receptive and interactive with the public. Observers say the manner of how he conducts his long-stalled media conference will be the first test of progress. Yoon, Arirang News.
And President Yoon has pledged to, quote, protect the precious value of labour and to promote fair and safe working conditions. The pledge was shared on his social platform earlier on this Wednesday, May 1st, to mark Labour Day, better known as International Workers' Day. He also voiced his gratitude to the more than 28 million workers in the country, adding that Korea's remarkable economic advancements were made in light of the dedication of workers. He further vowed the government would seek to ensure that people find meaning in life through work. And speaking about work and the economy, cars and chips continue to keep Korea's exports expanding and its trade figures in its favor. Our Park Gon-woo has the latest numbers.
South Korea's exports saw another on-year increase in April, rising for the 7th straight month. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Wednesday, outbound shipments saw an on-year jump of 13.8% to over $56.2 billion of export value last month. 13 out of 15 main export items saw growth in April, which was the largest number of items seeing an increase this year. Outbound shipments of automobiles hit a record high of nearly $6.8 billion, up 10.3% on year. Exports from the IT sector, including chips, displays, computers, and wireless devices, all saw increases for the second consecutive month. The value of semiconductor exports jumped to nearly $10 billion in April, a 56.1% increase on year. In terms of region, 7 out of 9 major export regions saw growth in exports. Outbound shipments to the U.S. increased for the 9th month in a row, reaching a record high $11.4 billion in April, up 24.3% on year. The value of shipments to China also once again exceeded $10 billion in the same month. The value of imports into South Korea also rose by more than 5% on year last month, to around $54.7 billion, resulting in a trade surplus of $1.53 billion. That's the 11th consecutive month the country has seen a trade surplus since June 2023. South Korea's trade ministry said the trade surplus was recorded despite global uncertainties, and it would support companies so that robust export performance will continue in the second quarter. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
Staying on the export front, overseas shipments of Korea's eco-friendly vehicles lost ground during the first quarter of this year for the first time in 13 quarters. According to the Korea Automobile Manufacturers Association on Wednesday, exports of eco-friendly vehicles plunged 5.6% to 178,000 units during the January to March period amid weak global demand for EVs. Now, this marks the first time since the fourth quarter of 2020 that exports tumbled into negative territory. Starting today, May 1st, a new transportation discount option goes into effect, offering greater transit access. That being said, our An Sung-jin compares this latest option to Seoul's own public transport card.
Seoul City's climate card has proved to be a hit, with 1 million sold in 70 days up till the beginning of April, exceeding the target of 500,000. This unlimited transport card, which also includes public bikes for the price of 65,000 won, or around $50, is geared toward users of buses and subways in Seoul. But starting Wednesday, there's another public transport discount card, the Kpass. The biggest difference is that this can be used nationwide, and if used at least 15 times a month, there's a partial reimbursement of travel costs. People between the ages of 19 and 39 can receive 30% cashback and 53% for users in the lower income bracket. The rest will get 20% off for using public transport up to 60 times a month. This discount program covers intercity buses and subways and is especially useful for those who commute to Seoul from areas just outside the capital. This comes amid efforts from the government to expand transport benefits to more regions.
As fees for public transport continue to climb, and with this card paying back at least 20%, it will relieve the pressure on commuters. Also, when it comes to carbon neutrality, these benefits will lead to more people using public transport.
With different public transport cards to choose from, one expert suggests that now customers can select one based on their specific needs.
As transport and food take up a big part of people's living costs, being able to select a transport card that suits you increases convenience and helps save money.
A majority of the country's cities and provinces are already part of the project, but the government has pledged to continue talks with the remaining 40 municipal governments that are not a part of it at the moment. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Seoul's Finance and Economy Minister Choi Sang-mok says steps will be taken in the near future to address pressing social concerns, including youth unemployment and low birth rates, by boosting access to relevant information and allowing for longer paternity leave. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryeon reports.
The country's demographic concerns, namely the low birth rate and the dwindling workforce, are being addressed through a series of new measures to come in the second half of the year. During an emergency economic ministerial meeting on Wednesday, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok unveiled the government's plans to improve social mobility.
We have prepared measures to increase social mobility in 3 areas: jobs, education, and capital formation.
The first of the measures to be introduced aims to heighten the participation of young people and women in the workforce. In March, the number of those below the age of 30 in employment fell on year. The number of those in their 20s and 30s who said that they weren't seeking employment for no particular reason and just taking a break has been hovering around the 600,000 range since last December. As a result, the government is creating an all-care platform that aims to offer more than 1.4 million young people and those not in employment, education or training, employment-related information and linking them to jobs. Paternity leave immediately following birth will also be doubled to 20 working days in order to prevent career breaks and support re-employment for new parents, in light of a recent report from the Career Development Institute that suggested being unable to resume economic activity after giving birth was a key reason behind the low birth rate. Data released by Statistics Korea show that South Korea's population could drop to as low as 36 million by 2072, as the country saw its lowest fertility rate last year at 0.72. As for improving education, the government will be expanding the age range for various national scholarships. A scholarship that was previously only available for middle school and high school students will now be extended to elementary school students from low-income families, while another that links students with jobs at SMEs and provides tuition fees will prioritize students with such backgrounds. Moon Hae-ryeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, over in Melbourne on this Wednesday, foreign and defence ministers of South Korea and Australia held talks on regional matters. Foreign Minister Chu Tae-yeol and Defence Minister Shin Won-sik met with their Australian counterparts, Richard Marles and Penny Wong respectively, for the so-called 2+2 talks. On the agenda were efforts to promote peace and prosperity, to strengthen Indo-Pacific cooperation and to bolster bilateral initiatives under their comprehensive strategic partnership. In the Middle East, fresh fears have been fueled about the fate of Rafah as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claims a raid into the southern Gaza city will take place regardless of a ceasefire deal. Our Lee Seung-jae explains.
It's been nearly 7 months since the armed conflict between Israel and Hamas began in October 2023, and another round of negotiations has begun. A deal would mean the release of Israeli hostages, aid relief for Palestinians, and avoiding an Israeli offensive in Rafah. However, All that seems to be up in the air now, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear that an Israeli offensive in Rafah will be conducted with or without a deal. Netanyahu and his government have called the southern Gaza region Hamas's last stronghold, with the Israeli leader emphasizing that stopping the war before achieving all of its goals is out of the question. Responding to Netanyahu's remarks, the White House on Tuesday expressed its opposition to a Rafah offensive. According to White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby, the U.S. doesn't want to see an operation that hasn't factored in safety and security of the over 1.5 million Palestinian refugees in the region. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Tuesday that during his planned talks with Netanyahu, he would convince Israel that it needs to allow for an increased flow of aid into Gaza. Blinken says while there have been some improvements in the humanitarian aid situation in the enclave, much more is needed to ensure proper assistance reaches the Palestinians in a sustained manner. Wednesday's meeting between Blinken and Netanyahu will come on the back of U.S. President Joe Biden's warning to the Israeli leader that Washington's policy could shift if Israel fails to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering, and the safety of aid workers. 이승재, Arirang News.
And speaking about safety, South Koreans are banned from traveling to Haiti as of today. Seoul's foreign ministry issued a level 4 travel advisory against the Caribbean nation on this Wednesday in light of escalating gang violence there. The government here recently evacuated 13 South Korean nationals to the neighboring Dominican Republic. There are currently some 60 South Koreans still in Haiti who are now required to acquire special validation to remain there.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. We begin today in the US, where former President Donald Trump has been fined $9,000 and held in contempt of court for violating a gag order issued to protect witnesses and jurors in his hush money trial. Justice Juan Marchan accepted 9 out of 10 online statements flagged by prosecutors as violations, each costing Trump $1,000. The online posts were made between April 10th and 17th, including an article where Michael Cohen, his former lawyer and a prominent witness in the trial, was called a serial liar. Trump said outside the courtroom that the gag order is totally unconstitutional before posting on his Truth Social platform that Judge Merchan had taken away his free speech rights, claiming that the trial is rigged. The fine is due on Friday. Judge Merchan said he will consider further penalties for Trump's additional statements on Thursday's hearing. In the UK, a 14-year-old boy has been killed and 4 others injured after an attacker went on a rampage armed with a long sword in northeast London. A 36-year-old suspect has been arrested by the Metropolitan Police. At around 7 a.m. local time on Tuesday, London's Met Police responded to reports of a car crashing into a house in Hainault and people being stabbed. The attacker also injured 2 police officers before he was tasered and arrested. While the police said investigations are underway for an incident that they described as truly horrific, Met Police Chief Superintendent Stuart Bell said that the attack is unlikely to be terror-related or targeted. Chief Superintendent Bell also said that the 14-year-old boy had died shortly after being taken to hospital, while the 2 officers and 2 civilians had received significant stab wounds but were not life-threatening. In northern Peru, a bus crash has killed 25 and injured 13 others as it overturned and crashed down a slope into a river on Sunday evening. In what is the country's deadliest highway accident in the past 2 years, local media outlets reported that the bus was traveling from the nearby town of Selendín to the town of Sorochuco in the Andean Mountains. The injured have been taken to the Cajamarca Regional Hospital, while in a statement released on Monday, the local government announced 3 days of mourning. In the US, the winner of the 8th largest Powerball jackpot was revealed on Monday. The winner of the $1.3 billion prize is Cheng Charlie Saipan, who emigrated to the US from Laos in 1994. Saipan had worked as a machinist until he was diagnosed with cancer in 2016 and has been undergoing chemotherapy, receiving his latest treatment just last week. While accepting the prize money, he said, "How am I going to have time to spend all of this money? How long will I live?" Saipan said he would split the money with his wife and a friend. The jackpot has a cash value of around $422 million after taxes. He has decided to take a lump sum payment. The biggest lottery jackpot ever in the US was at $2.04 billion in California in 2022. Kim Siang, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. May 1st, Labor Day here in Korea started on a wet and cloudy note for those in the southern parts of the country. And please do expect to see light rain through the afternoon, while Jeollado provinces could see passing rain during the day today. However, those of us in central regions need sun protection items with plenty of sunshine in the forecast. UV rays will be very high in the afternoon. And along with sunshine, afternoon temperatures should be a couple of degrees higher for central areas, but cloudy skies and rain should bring down the highs in southern parts of the country this afternoon. East Coast regions are even breezier due to easterly winds with a high of 18 degrees in Busan, but Seoul tops out at 24 degrees Celsius. The air quality will be normal to good nationwide all day today. Heading towards summer-like temperatures through Saturday, that nationwide rain in the forecast on Children's Day afternoon continuing into next Monday. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
Right, and those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session.